All right, we're live. Hello, everybody. Hello, Peter Lavelle in Moscow. Hello, Alexander Mercouris in London. Everyone in the US and everyone that celebrates Thanksgiving, happy Thanksgiving. Everyone that's going to be doing some shopping, if you celebrate the Black Friday deals that are going on all over the world. Peter, you were telling us that they even have Black Friday now in Moscow everywhere.
Actually, yeah, what they've done is it's like Black Friday week. I mean, they're really pushing. I mean, obviously they want people to. They're turning it into a consumption holiday like they do in the West. But it's not the long lines and all that. I mean, no, it's good deals. So 2 for 3 for 1 and stuff like that. So I mean, it's becoming slowly but surely a big deal here.
Mm-hmm. All right. Are you guys out there? If you guys can hear us okay, let us know in the chat. Alexander, you hear everything okay? Peter, you hear everything okay?
Absolutely. I hear everything okay. And hello, everybody. And Mishkin, my dog, is saying hello also, if you can see him.
God, he's big.
Yeah.
All right. All right, guys, you can send us your questions on the chat as well, and we will try to answer everything. I hope everyone is doing well this Friday morning. This is our second weekly live chat that we're having, and we hope that you guys enjoy it. We'll try to keep it to an hour, and this does not replace our big Sunday chat that we have every Sunday evening. That is GMT time, Moscow, Athens, London. And let's get into a big news week. Of course, we are in the message that I sent to everybody before the chat. I put 3 topics. I put Brexit, Trump, Saudi Arabia, and of course, the Clinton Foundation investigation that is going on now as well in the US. And Brexit is obviously the big news story. And there was a couple of questions before we started the chat, and one of them is on Brexit. Alexander, let's give this one to you. And it's about Spain and Gibraltar. Yeah. So what do you think Spain's going to do with Gibraltar? Are they going to try to pull a Falklands trick? It came from Hans Scheffer, and they would like to know if you could elaborate on how the Gibraltar piece of the chessboard fits in with Brexit.
Right. Well, I think the first thing to understand about Gibraltar is that Gibraltar is, of course, claimed by Spain. It was captured by the British from Spain during the war. I think during the 18th century. I think it was the War of the Spanish Succession, one of these wars, and the British have held on to it ever since. But the Spanish have consistently claimed that Gibraltar is part of Spain. And of course, for the Spanish, if Britain leaves the European Union, then of course all sorts of barriers start going up between Spain and Gibraltar. And the Spanish are saying, if you're going to have a soft border with between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, why are you going to start now having hard borders between Spain and Gibraltar? And Spain says that this thing hasn't been considered and properly looked at in this agreement. Now, the Spanish are absolutely right, but I think it is very important to say that at the EU Council meeting that is going to happen on Sunday, or at least which is supposed to happen on Sunday, because it's not guaranteed that it will happen, even if the Spanish vote against this agreement, it is not enough to prevent it going forward, because this agreement, unlike many EU agreements, only requires majority voting. So the Spanish can complain, but they cannot prevent a withdrawal agreement being signed off by the European Union in this form if the rest of the European Union wants it to happen. And the Germans have said very clearly that they want this deal to be rubber stamped on Sunday. So what the Germans want generally happens. The French are not keen because they're concerned about fisheries. The Spanish, with perhaps greater cause, are not happy because of Gibraltar. But I think, provided all the other pieces are aligned, it will be signed through.
Well, I mean, it's from my understanding, it's a non-binding. It's like a memorandum of understanding more than anything. So the Spaniards can say whatever they want. It's not going to it's not going to have an impact. As far as I understand, unless something happened in the last few hours, Gibraltar isn't even mentioned. Okay, that's exactly how the European Union does it. If we can't resolve it, just ignore it. Okay, I mean, you know, this issue with Ireland, it shows that this is really going to turn into a problem here. And I'm very concerned. I'm actually of Irish ancestry, and considering all of the work that has been done over the last couple of the Good Friday agreements and things like that, I just don't want to go backwards. I would be a catastrophe. A hard border goes up there. I don't understand the wiggle room on this. Okay, I don't think anybody really does. Before we started our podcast here, I was querying Alexander Mercouris. I mean, if this doesn't get through Parliament and more defections happen, I mean, I guess hard Brexit is Alexander Mercouris. What is the likelihood of that? And does anybody really understand what that means? Because I don't.
Right. Very straightforward answer. Let's just explain what hard Brexit is. Britain has invoked Article 50 of the European Union. That says that within 2 years of Britain invoking Article 50, Britain exits the European Union. That is on the 31st of March, 2019. So that is the date when Britain must leave the European Union. If it has not agreed terms with the European Union before it quits the European Union, then it leaves without any terms being agreed. And that is a hard Brexit. A hard Brexit means that it's left without any terms agreed. It has no treaty or understanding or free trade agreement on any issue with the European Union, and it trades from that moment on with the European Union on World Trade Organization terms. Now, there are some people who are saying if that happens, it's a catastrophe. And we're going to have all kinds of lorries blocking up Dover and Calais because they can't move, and medicines can't be bought to stock up British hospitals because all the arrangements won't have been sorted out. I have to say, I think these fears are wildly exaggerated.
I do too.
I think there are always things that can be done in these situations. I think that is what government is for. Government is to deal with problems like that. And the British government certainly can deal with those kind of problems and ought to be dealing with them. The great problem is that up to this moment in time, Theresa May has done nothing to prepare for it. So we are in effect going into this thing with nothing prepared in the eventuality that there is a hard Brexit. And can I just finish and answer your question, Peter? If nobody in Britain can come up with a solution to the terms of Brexit between now and March, or indeed for practical purposes between now and the new year, then a no-deal Brexit happens, because that is the legal default position.
One of the things, I looked at the draft document, the 25-page draft, and one of the things that I'm very curious about is that it's staying in the customs union, but it seems in my reading, it really puts up barriers for the UK to have trade agreements, new trade agreements with other countries. And that's kind of self-defeating, isn't it? I mean,
well,
I thought, when you're out, there may be problems, but you should have more room for maneuverability. It seems like with this soft Brexit, there are limitations on your options, but that's my reading of it.
Well, Peter, you are absolutely right, because can I explain it again? Now, if you read British newspapers, you will constantly come across these expressions, the customs union and the single European market. And it's quite obvious to me that 99 times out of 100, people who write about these things don't understand what those two things are, and imagine that they are something very different. The customs union, which, to be very clear, Britain is going to remain a part of, is the European Union agreement, which says that trade in goods and services, especially in goods within the European Union, happens without any kind of tariffs being imposed. The key point is that members of the customs union negotiate trade agreements with other countries as a bloc. They cannot negotiate trade agreements separately and independently. So by remaining a member of the customs union, Britain cannot negotiate trade agreements with other countries. And just to finish with the European single market, that is the body of law which regulates how goods regulates that trade in goods. So that is the famous acquis that you hear so much about, the huge body of European law that says what measurements are supposed to be, what standards are supposed to be, all those things, which is administered by the European Court of Justice. And essentially, by remaining within the customs union, Britain will, to a very great extent, be obliged to follow this body of law. Well, it's and will be administered by the European Court of Justice.
But it seems that this agreement turns the UK into a bit minor player to the European Union decision-making process.
Of course it does. You're quite right, Peter, because coming back to what we said, Britain cannot negotiate third-party trade agreements with other countries.
So what are they getting out of this?
And of course, since it is no longer a part of the European Union, it cannot legislate, it plays no role in deciding what all these rules and regulations that will determine the trade in goods is going to be. So what do they get? They get an inferior position to the one in which they have now. Even many Brexiters are saying that. At this moment in time, Dominic Raab, one of the toughest, most hardline Brexiters, who resigned from the cabinet last week, is actually going on television and in the newspapers and saying, if this is the deal, Britain would have been better off staying in the European Union, because it would at least have had a say in that case in the supranational body, the European Union, which will continue to a great extent to control its affairs. So the British have got from a position of limited sovereignty, which is what they had in the European Union, to a position of no sovereignty on trade and economic issues at all. So the answer is the British have got the worst possible.
That's 99% of Brexit right there, okay?
Well, of course it is. That's exactly what it is.
You know, the thing is, for me, it's very interesting watching them from afar, is that when you do the campaign leading up to the referendum, what you heard a lot of people talking about was self-determination and sovereignty, okay? Those are concepts that I think a lot of people say, yeah, well, that's what we want, okay? But the agreement has nothing to do with self-identity and sovereignty at all. I mean, after everything we have gone through watching this.
Well, the slogan that really caught fire during the referendum was taking back control. This is what people were talking about. This does not give back control. That is absolutely not what has happened. In fact, it loses control. Now, the one thing that Theresa May says she has managed to get is agreement about a movement of people. In other words, there will be exactly. Now, I have to say, having read this agreement very carefully, both the 585-page withdrawal agreement and the 26-page political statement, which came out yesterday and which you were reading, Peter, I am very skeptical if it is in fact going to stop free movement, because it seems to me that as a member of the customs union and in effect of the European single market, because the two go together, Britain is going to be bound by decisions of the European Court of Justice, and the European Court of Justice has consistently said that where there is free movement of goods, there is free movement of people. So I suspect that we will find, going further down the line, that this great concession that Theresa May thinks she's obtained on free movement of people hasn't been obtained at all. So, in fact, we are in a even worse position.
Well, if you look at
realize.
it's interesting to me is it's Berlin wins. They now will have control of the continent. The British are out.
Absolutely, yeah. Yes, you're right. Absolutely. I mean,
this is world historic, you know. I mean, at least in modern times. I mean, because that Britain was always one of the pillars of European security and economics, and now they are just exiting. You know, that special relationship with America isn't worth a piece of paper it's written on. I guarantee you that, particularly during the Trump administration.
Well, indeed so, Peter, and coming back to this, because of the nature of this agreement, Britain cannot quit the European Union, the customs union, or the parts of the customs union that it is joining or remaining a part of, without the European Union's agreement. That is clearly set out in the texts. So it is giving up more of its sovereignty with no legal option for getting it back. Whilst it was a member of the European Union, it could, in theory, get all its sovereignty back by invoking Article 50. This withdrawal agreement will lose that option. So it's impossible to see how a proud country with a great history, a former great power, a country which has played such a huge role in what you and I both recall was the concert of Europe, it's now in effect been absolutely defanged. I mean, as I said, it's going to be a province of the Empire of Brussels.
Wow, what a way to put it, Alexander. MS, a £10 super chat. Thank you. No question is asked, but thank you. And greetings from Portugal. Lots of people from Australia, New Zealand, Cambodia, British Columbia, Serbia. Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining this this live chat. And Alexander, there's a question from Kevin Dillon. What about the hard border issue with Norway, EU, Switzerland, and the EU? There is no hard border there. So why is there a hard border issue now?
Well, first of all, all these countries that have been mentioned, Norway especially, Switzerland also, have negotiated what are called bespoke arrangements with the EU, and they've come to all kinds of agreements. They've, in many cases, accepted limitations of their sovereignty. The fundamental difference between Norway, Switzerland, and the rest is that they don't have this extraordinary arrangement whereby they cannot terminate these arrangements with the European Union without the European Union's agreement. If Norway wants to end this arrangement that it has with the European Union, which suits it pretty well, then it can. Britain, if it signs up to this, cannot, at least not in international law terms. And that is a fundamental difference. Now, if we talk about soft borders, hard borders, what I think a lot of people were expecting was that once Britain fully left the European Union and became entirely sovereign, it would negotiate some form of trade agreement or free trade agreement with the European Union. That is basically what Canada has done. And that would have softened the border between Britain and the European Union. Well, that is not what has happened. There is a fundamental difference between being in a free trade agreement and being part of someone else's customs union and regulated by their laws through their single market. So we are looking at a very different arrangement from Canada. Some people, Canada and some of these other countries, some people have suggested that Britain should use the agreements that Britain had that Canada and Norway had made with the European Union as a model to negotiate a similar agreement for itself with the European Union. But that, for all sorts of complicated reasons, political reasons, complicated perhaps more in Theresa May's mind than in reality, that never happened.
All right, Peter, we have a couple of questions for you. One of the questions was submitted by Trey Morris before the live chat, and then I have a super chat for you as well, Peter, from Lee. So let's get to Trey Morris's question real quick. And he wants to know about Bill Browder and how much of a force is he within the United States and within the deep state? And what do you think about Bill Browder using social media, specifically Twitter, to get his message out?
Well, he can get his message out if he wants. I mean, like anyone else on Twitter. I mean, he's got deep pockets, and he knows how to employ lawyers to protect him. As far as a player in the deep state, I don't know about that, but I mean, people like himself were very active in Russia in the 1990s and made quite a bit of money. We all know the stories about. We have his narrative of what happened to him in Russia, and then the Russian state has a completely different one. Let's face it, a lot of Western financiers looted Russia in the 1990s, and they lined their pockets here. So Browder's going to be, he employs a lot of resources to protect his money and the money of other people that were also involved in various affairs in Russia. So I think that the true story about him is coming out slowly but surely, and I think he's going to get more and more aggressive to protect his name. But I think it's coming out. What's really interesting is that there was a documentary recently made about him, and when I watched it, it was as if it was some kind of revelation to the viewer. But I already knew that story before I saw the documentary. Everyone here in Russia knows that. Okay, so I wasn't. The only thing that it was interesting for me was that actually somebody did say it, the truth, in a documentary made by a Russian director that is quite hostile to Vladimir Putin. So it certainly wasn't carrying water for the Kremlin. So. Yes, I mean, Browder has a lot of influence. Look, I mean, he was able to con the U.S. Congress, for sanctions against Russia. Actually, ideas about sanctions are now being employed around the world globally. So, yeah, he's got pull. And if you cross him, you'll be served. Okay, so be careful what you say. I know people that have had problems in talking about him. That's maybe why I'm being very careful with my words right now, because he's very aggressive in using lawfare against people.
All right, and we have a super chat from Lee. Peter, how can the moderate Ukrainians get rid of the Nazis? Can there be an election? Is there opposition? Communists? Corruption by Poroshenko admitted?
It's, before 2014, I'm banned from Ukraine now. Okay, I can't go there. But before 2014, it was a country I loved visiting and really nice people. But what has happened here after the illegal takeover of the government, the coup, you have to look at what the political situation is in Ukraine. They banned the Party of Regions and they banned the Communist Party. So what happened was, you had in Ukraine a very delicate balance. It was a very politically very fragile place. And so in the east, you had the communists and the Party of Regions that balanced out Ukraine. But when you get rid of them, it flips to the right. And I don't see those parties coming back. Those people have been completely disenfranchised. There's a process of Ukrainization. This Banderite ideology is being taught to young people. There's a very interesting documentary out there now about young children being trained by right-wing militias. So you're getting a new generation of people being fed this ideology. And this ideology is a fake replacement for bad economics. Okay, so it's the Russians' fault. It's the subhumans in the East, and white supremacy is coming into vogue. Max Blumenthal has an excellent article about what's going on in Ukraine right now, the involvement of the United States, even the state of Israel, in supporting these militias that have been able to get themselves into state structures. Which means they're polluting those state structures in the process. And the government is very afraid of these militias, very afraid, because they will use force against the government. Poroshenko has single-digit popularity going into the presidential campaign, an election cycle. So nothing really good, folks, going on in Ukraine right now, and it's only getting worse. Mark Slobodka and others, I've been arguing about this for years. This ideology, this racist ideology, it can't fix the economy. And at one point, their ideology is not going to be enough of a replacement for real economic policy. It is absurd to think that Ukraine can get along well in the world without its large neighbor to the east. And the thing is, I'll give you a real quick example here. I know a lot of people, I know Ukrainians that have come to Russia because there's work here, okay? And they're amazed. There is absolutely no hostility towards Ukrainians here at all. I mean, if you look at a lot of people's names, you can say, oh, that's a Ukrainian descent, that's a Ukrainian name. There's no, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to people here. But Russians going to Kiev, they can be harassed. Before 2014, when I would go there, everybody spoke Russian in Kiev. It was a Russian-speaking city, okay? And now it's frowned upon. It's not taught in schools. Social media that's in Russian, the Russian language, being banned. Okay, Yandex, the Russia's answer to Google, they're under pressure, and it's a company that's registered in the United States. It's not registered. That company's not registered in Russia. So I mean, this is just blind hatred here, and that you can't run an economy in a society for very long just on that kind of ideology. So sorry, on every single matrix, negative.
All right, Alexander, do you have any quick thoughts on that? And then I have a question for you about what's going on in Kosovo. But do you have any thoughts on what Peter said about Ukraine and that super chat question?
Well, first of all, he's absolutely right. I mean, what we are seeing in Ukraine is a flight from reality, which has been gathering pace, in my opinion, ever since independence from the Soviet Union in 1991, and which has markedly accelerated since 2014.
With American help.
With enormously destructive consequences for Ukrainian society. And can I just illustrate Peter's point about Ukrainians being fully integrated into Russia? We may all have heard about a man called Prokopchuk, who is a Russian police general, who was at one point talked about as a possible a member or a president of Interpol. He is, in fact, Ukrainian. His name is Ukrainian, and he was born in Ukraine, but he came to Russia and he built his career here, and he is conceived of in Russia as entirely a person who is fully integrated in Russia. There is no hostility to Ukrainians in Russia. Now, what cannot be sustained, what is unsustainable, cannot be sustained. At some point, this process in Ukraine will burn itself out. It always does. There will come a point in time when Ukrainians themselves will say enough. We are nowhere near that point yet. And to expect, in the conditions which exist in Ukraine at the moment, which Peter has correctly described, with Nazi militias and right-wing militias all over the place, that free elections can take place in these conditions, with parties like the Party of the Regions, the biggest party in Ukraine, formally banned, it is impossible. So, yes, at some point, the reaction will set in. Reality will come in, but not now.
All right, we have a question from Tomislav in Belgrade, and I'm not sure about this news topic. Maybe you know about it, Alexander, but I would like to see how you address what's going on in Kosovo. And Tomislav wants to know, what are your thoughts on Albanians arresting Serbs in Kosovo? What about Kosovo in general as well, Alexander?
Right. Well, the first thing to say is that Kosovo is, in my opinion, an illegal entity. I mean, it was taken from Serbia illegally through an illegal war, what I would unquestionably define as a war of aggression, and was separated from Serbia in complete violation of agreements that the United States and the Western powers entered into in order to end that war, which they waged against Serbia in 1999, illegally, but which they wanted to end. So there are multiple illegalities, if you like, about it. So having people arrested in Kosovo by the authorities of what is already an illegal entity is an extremely concerning thing, especially when it is being done for political reasons. Now, what we've had in Kosovo, if you remember back before 1999, there was lots of talk about how the Serb authorities were persecuting Albanians. It is debatable. In fact, it is that was simply not the case in the way that it was being talked about. What we have seen since 1999 is a systematic policy by the Albanian authorities of this secessionist entity, this illegal entity, to basically harass and discriminate against Serbs. Now, that is the background to all of this. There are recently moves, controversial in Serbia for very good reasons, controversial in Kosovo itself among some Albanians, to try to come to some kind of a negotiated solution which will possibly involve exchanges of territory. We will see where that is going. It seems that the Russians are in some way involved in all of this, but again, I'm not sure to what extent that is the case. And I'm not sure whether these projects will actually succeed. So we will just have to wait and see.
Minister Lavrov said that he would that Russia, generally speaking, would support whatever moves the Serbs wanted to make, whatever overtures they want to make. That Russia would have their back.
Exactly. I mean, that is the Russian position, and I think that will remain so. So at the moment, attempts by the Western powers to secure the independence of Kosovo by getting it admitted to organizations like Interpol. One of the things people don't know is that Interpol refused at this famous meeting that we've been hearing so much about recently, for example, to admit Kosovo, because it is considered by many countries around the world, including Russia, China, India, big countries, in other words, an illegal secessionist entity. So we will see. We will see what kind of agreements are reached. Personally, I think that the feeling in Serbia and in other places, and even in Kosovo itself, at the moment is running too strong against an agreement for that to be possible.
All right, Peter, John Lowen wants to know, he notes that China is developing infrastructure that makes the U.S. look very third world. Do you think the U.S. will wake up to the multipolar world now? Infrastructure is a hot topic it should be a hot topic in the U.S. government, because America does need to upgrade its infrastructure very badly.
It needs it big time. I think in the current political environment in the United States, and I think that I think Donald Trump will be reelected. Okay, so we have 2 years to the election, then now four after that. If he's reelected, that's 6 years. That means getting infrastructure through. That's a lot. That's a big ticket item. You're going to need a lot of bipartisan work in Congress to get that through. I don't see that happening. No, they want to subpoena Ivanka to look at her server. Okay, I mean, they're just going down a rabbit hole of just investigation versus investigation as the country falls apart. Okay. As it falls apart. It's really quite embarrassing going to JFK, LAX, you know, I mean, they're pretty shabby airports. I mean, the United States needs infrastructure 101 in a big, big way. It's going to cost a lot of money. You need to look, the 1950s, the interstate system, Alex, you know it. I mean, America didn't have an interstate system at all. It was very backward. And, you know, the interstate system was made for two reasons, commerce and for being able to move the military across the country very, very quickly. It was one of the biggest infrastructure projects ever. We need something similar like that now. But I don't see the political will. And U.S. budget deficits now are truly, truly scary. And on top of that, you have country after country in the world are no longer buying American securities, okay? We've passed the tipping point. I mean, what the U.S. has to pay for interest now is extraordinary. So their ability to go to the international markets is getting crimped, and that window is closing as the multipolar window opens, okay, at the same time. All of this bickering, cheap politics, this quantitative easing, which is just a complete farce. The U.S. is putting itself in a very dangerous position, and the more danger the U.S. economy faces, the more for the global economy as well. The Chinese, on the other hand, are, now, when you fly to Beijing, I remember we were coming in and we started seeing these, we're getting lower and lower, and we started seeing these housing estates. And I thought, oh, we must be close to the airport. No, it took a long time still. The housing that they've built, I mean, they've gone infrastructure crazy.
Yeah.
And they have money in the bank, a lot of it. So, the Chinese have their priorities correct, okay? They know what they're doing. This whole thing with the United States, I'm convinced that if there's a trade war, the U.S. can't win. All right, it simply can't. And I think a lot of what we've heard in this year was a lot of electoral politicking, to be tough on China. But no, the Chinese just have their priorities correct. The U.S. is fascinated with controlling the world militarily. The Chinese are quietly building their own institutions, alternatives to the IMF, to the World Bank, to SWIFT, and even we could even see an alternative World Trade Organization, a coalition of the willing. If the U.S. is going to use lawfare, the Chinese will say, well, forget it, okay? Because they have the means to make the decisions. They have options. The U.S., the options get fewer and fewer and fewer. They're so deep in debt that they're investing in American securities is just simply not attractive. And this is something that's so obvious. I was talking Alistair Crook, really great analyst, but mostly of the Middle East. I mean, he was tracking. He said in August of this year, it tipped over, where now the debt payments are so extravagant that the U.S. is going to have a hard time paying for it. You can't go any further debt to pay this debt.
All right, we've got some great questions coming in, and I want to stay a little bit on that topic. Peter and Alexander, this is addressed to both of you, and it comes from Borchdi the Mighty, and it's kind of connected to what you just said, Peter. It's a broad question, and Borchdi wants to know, in recent years, I've noticed more whitewashing of history. Why is this happening now? Who wants to take the lead? I want to hear you would like to hear from both of you guys.
Well, there is that famous quotation from 1984 by George Orwell that he who controls the present controls the past. He who controls the past controls the future. And what we are seeing increasingly in a situation of political confrontation and crisis is a growing need by certain people around the world to control the past in order to control the future. So you see that in Ukraine, where there is a desire now to whitewash what happened during the Second World War.
Look at Timothy Snyder whitewashing 20th century. Russia was at fault for everything. Okay, they went from Putin now to
exactly.
The entire history of Russia is an assault on Western civilization. It's extraordinary.
Exactly. And of course, Ukraine is only a small part of this because it is happening in so many places. And in fact, history is being reinterpreted in most extraordinary ways in all sorts of places and all the time. And to a great extent, also, what is being taught now, I was never an academic historian in the way that Peter was. I mean, Peter was an academic. I've never been an academic, but my original training was as a historian. And what I see now coming out of all sorts of places, is not anything that I recognize as history any longer. It is becoming a malleable subject where you change facts if they no longer suit you. Now, there are many people in academic history who are holding out against this thing, and superb work is still being done. But it is quite unnerving to go into the newspapers now here in Britain and the United States and in France and even in Germany and read interpretations of history that are coming out, which are essentially not history at all, but attempts to model or to control the way in which knowledge is understood so as to make things that happen now seem more politically acceptable.
One of the biggest problems here, and well, I guess we can use an example in the United States. Remember in the beginning of the year, this whole tearing down of statues, particularly in the South, the American South, which of course were erected by Democrats, okay, which is a different story, but the Democrats were the party of slavery. Let's remember that.
Yeah.
What has happened here, and this is how academia can poison a society, and not enlighten it, poison it, is this taking contemporary values and projecting them back into the past. And that's ahistorical. That's ahistorical. All right. Robert E. Lee, he was probably the most accomplished commandant of West Point ever. Okay. A lot of the curriculum, a lot of the rules and regulations and customs crystallized under the time that he was commandant. After that, he was a general for the Virginian Army, okay, and lost the part. He was on the losing side of the Civil War. Does that make him someone that you need to blot out of history? No, not at all. You have to judge people by their times, okay? I mean, it's really quite ridiculous. Then you don't learn anything about history whatsoever. Then there is no history. I think, for example, some South Africans I met when I was in Beijing last year, and they were just really rabid about destroying everything that was associated with apartheid. And I just said, well, if you destroy every single statue, every single monument, the next generation will have no idea what you're talking about because you have no physical culture. All right. I mean, it's one of the things I see every single day in Moscow. Statues of Lenin. Okay. And for me, it's really problematic because I think the Bolsheviks, were not a good thing for Russia at all. Okay. But they're part of the history, and you have to put it into the right context. Okay, and I think what's happening in the West is destroying all context, and then you don't have anything to learn, and then you live in this forever one moment. There's no past and there's no future. There's only now, which has no context to understand the past or the future, and I find that terrible. And as a historian, I love walking around Moscow, seeing a statue of Mayakovsky, for example, and his poetry, and Pushkin, and it's so amazing. Were all these people virtuous? Why do we always have virtue as a litmus test? Okay, it shouldn't be. That's thinking ahistorically.
Peter, I'm staying with you, and then Alexander, I want to get your view on this. This is another broad topic, but it's very connected, and it comes from Claire, the question, and I hope I get Claire's question correct. What do you think is the role of feminism, third wave modern feminism, in what's happening in the world today, especially on some of the topics that you guys have just discussed right now, the whitewashing of history, the tearing down of statues? The floor is yours, Peter.
Well, I think third wave feminism is toxic, absolutely toxic. I think it's actually not in women's interest whatsoever. And I think there's plenty of studies to show that it doesn't make women or men any happier. In fact, it makes a lot of people really miserable. I mean, it's just like, these transgender sports. I mean, who's the biggest loser? Women are the biggest losers, okay? I mean, you can declare yourself a woman, and even though you're a man, and you can compete against women here. How is that to women's advantage? It's ridiculous, okay? I was brought up when I was a little boy when the first wave, and you know what? It made pretty good sense to me. Yeah, women should be able to, be engineers. Women should be able to play football. I mean, they should be allowed into the workforce if they want to. I mean, they obviously should be educated. I mean, all of that was common sense to me, and it still makes common sense to me. But I mean, really, what a lot of this radical feminism, it's destroying any concept of gender, which I think is disastrous for everyone. Mm-hmm. And I think, and most importantly, it's disastrous for the family. It's maybe really mundane for some people, but if we have in the U.S. right now, you're getting an entire generation of 18 to 34-year-old men that are not marrying, not having families. All right, and if you destroy the family, then you don't have a society worth reproducing. Okay, I can't see how that makes anyone happy. And plus this war on men. Where's their place in society? I mean, there was Jordan Peterson had an excellent panel discussion. I think Alex, you and I were talking about it. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it's like 8 guys talking about what it's like to be a guy. I mean, it may sound really banal, but how often do you actually see that? I was really struck by it because it's always, minorities, women, handicapped people, fine. We should hear their voices, but you should hear voices of men as well. So this war on men, it's totally dysfunctional for society, and it doesn't generate any kind of social tranquility.
Alexander, what's your thoughts on feminism and the third wave of feminism and what it's done to the world today?
I mean, if I can just say, I think feminism as a phenomenon in basically 20th century history in the West was overwhelmingly a positive and good thing. Now, what Peter has been describing, I think what is sometimes referred to as third world feminism, or at least the more extreme versions of it, I have difficulty understanding, frankly, how it is feminist at all. Some of the things that are coming out of, especially American universities, seem to me to be far less concerned about real concerns of women and the kind of things that women have to face up to in their everyday lives and their problems, which are often the same as men, by the way, same problems as men have. Some of these things, it seems to me, have very little connection to that, and far more to do with certain people wanting to use the issue or issues around women in order to gain certain forms of political and cultural power. And I think that is a very oppressive thing. It is oppressive against women. It is oppressive against men also. Well, it is against lots of things, the family, certainly. And I think one of the points that was made by someone, which I think is an entirely valid one, is that one of the interesting things about some of these people is that they always seem to be angry and they never seem to be happy. That is a very concerning thing. So, as I said, I don't really see this as feminism. I don't really associate it with the feminism of the past, which, as I said, I think by promoting not just women's equality, but altering our understanding of women's roles in ways that were very positive in many ways.
What's most important here is opportunity. I think
exactly.
that is, I'm all for that. Okay.
Well, indeed, empowering.
Equality, no, but opportunity, yes.
Yes, I mean empowering women, but this isn't about that. As I said, this is, as I said, a power bid by some, frankly, I think rather sinister people.
This is one of the things that's happened in Western society, is that essentially women marry the state, and the state funds childbirth and child rearing. So you don't need a family if the father is the state. And and the left loves this here because you have capture. You capture part of the electorate. Okay, that's fun. That's what they want. All right, that's terrible for the family. Obviously.
And of course, I mean, as I said, there's a very strong political dimension to this, which you see it in the United States, because it is used to mobilize women in support of certain particular political things. So, for example, it is you can get vast crowds mobilizing to prevent Brett Kavanaugh going to the Supreme Court, but you have absolutely nothing to support, no similar crowds to protest against bombing in all kinds of places like Afghanistan, even though it is women in those places in Afghanistan who are more often than not the targets of those bombs. So,
one of the things, I'm glad, you brought up Kavanaugh. In the recent election cycle, right afterwards, you have these third wave feminists in members of the Democratic Party saying that white women portray their gender. They see how this gets inverted is that they are not allowed agency like men. See how it caves in on itself.
Well, this is exactly the
identity should determine your choices. No. Well, it's your character. It doesn't matter your gender, your color, your age. You have a right to choose. And these people on the left are saying no, because of your appearance.
Yeah.
That determines your identity and choices. That is a perversion of the entire history and achievements of Western civilization.
Yes, well, this is exactly the point. It is a power bid by certain very sinister people who are using certain issues to control others. And that is not what, as I said, the great feminists of the past, people like, Kollontai, people like, Dworkin, that is not what they were about at all.
I mean, look at the whole thing with Nancy Pelosi. I mean, this is where identity politics crashes. Well, why shouldn't there be a black Speaker of the House? Okay, and then now they can use the color card, they use the race card, or maybe age. Ageism now comes into play here. It's all ridiculous. Who's competent? Hello everyone. Who's competent? That's all I care about. After the election, this woman came on and said, well, the Democrats did really well. We have a Native American governor and we have 5 more black women in Congress and all that. And I just said, what about unity? And are these people competent? I don't care about their skin color. I don't care about their gender. Are they good politicians? That's all I care about.
Well, indeed. And can I just say, I mean, in China and Russia and those sort of countries, where women are now playing a very active role in life, in the economy, in political things, without any of this bizarre machinery. I mean, there are
without the ideology, they're doing better.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's true. Well, when the mantra is all about inclusivity, what usually happens is that you exclude just about everyone till there's no one left. So that's what's happening. That's what's happening with this whole, we're going to be inclusive and we're going to be inclusive and we're going to make a party that covers every gender and every race and every spectrum. At the end of the day, like you said, Peter, it's the white men, then it's the white women. Pretty soon it'll be the black women, that'll be the black men, that'll be the Asian men. And pretty soon there's going to be no one left.
And it is incredibly divisive, ultimately. It is not inclusive, it is the opposite, because that way you are dividing the community into particular groups. Sexual groups, gender groups, racial groups, age groups, whatever.
Look at Harvard University, the case against them. They penalize competence.
Yes.
If you're competent, but you're Asian. Okay. Oh, we don't want too many Asians here. That's Jim Crow. I mean, this is what we got away from.
Yes.
It should be competence. It doesn't matter your ethnic origins. If you're the best of the best, damn it, you should get your spot on merit. This is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Well, guys, we'll do like another 5-10 minutes. And on the feminist issue, I want to go to the most famous feminist. I'm with her, Hillary Clinton. So what is your take, Peter, on the fact that we're now going to be going into the whole Clinton Foundation thing again. We're going to call Comey in to testify. The Republicans have 6 weeks left. What's your take on what's going on now?
Can you say run out the clock? Okay, that's what they're going to do. I mean, the Republicans were buffoons not to go into this. Okay, this is ridiculous. They're all going to get away with it. Okay, I mean, at this point, you can be subpoenaed. Okay, we're going into the Christmas New Year cycle now. I mean, well, maybe next year. I can't do it right now. I mean, they can subpoena you, and you can say no. Then they can say, well, we're going to put some muscle behind it, and we're going to get you to talk. Okay, in the case of Comey, he's not going to come unless it's an open forum. He wants an open forum because then nothing sensitive can be talked about. I mean, this guy's a weasel, a real weasel. Okay, because he doesn't want his lies exposed, and he's just wait. It's no wonder that old Jimbo there has gone quiet recently. He's running out the clock. Okay, when the new Congress is sworn in, I bet you hear a lot about Comey in the news. All right, as far as I mean, there's the Clinton cash. I mean, there's so many. Peter Schwartz's book. I mean, there's plenty of pay for play there. Okay. I mean, why is it taking so long? Okay. I mean, it's all out there to be seen. Okay.
Saudi Arabia donations.
There's no political will. All right. Yeah. And so there is two different standards of justice. Okay. I mean, if you're a big time crook and you steal big time, you have a different set of rules. Okay. But if you jaywalk, you could get stopped. Okay. It's pure hypocrisy. The power protects power.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Alexander, we did a video on this, and I want your take real quick on what you think about opening up the Clinton Foundation investigation. And then, Alexander, with the remaining minutes we have, I would like you and Peter to get into someone who's gotten the short end of the stick, and that's Julian Assange.
Right. Well, quickly on the Clinton Foundation, it is too late for exactly the reasons that Peter said. If they pursued this thing 2 years ago, just after Trump was elected, when the Republicans had control of both the Senate and the House, they could have moved this thing forward and we could have got the truth. I still have some glimmers of hope that we will get to the truth of what happened during the 2016 election, how the Russiagate investigation was let loose, how the Trump campaign was infiltrated by informers, all those provocations. But on the Clinton Foundation, on the way in which the Clinton Foundation was used by the Clintons, I'm afraid it is too late for that. There just isn't the will there, and there just isn't the time. Now, on Julian Assange, it is a terrible situation. He is a person who was granted political asylum because he had a well-founded concern that he would be sent to the United States to face charges. We now know, because the US has leaked the fact, that there are indeed charges in a sealed indictment against him in the United States. This has been repeatedly denied by the British authorities and by the US authorities. We now know that is true. We have seen concerted attempts by the British government to undermine that grant of asylum by another country, even though those steps are contrary to international law. And we have seen pressure on Ecuador, which is buckling to effectively remove the grant of asylum from Assange so that he can be arrested in Britain and eventually sent to the United States. It is a terrible thing. It is a terrible indictment on the British system and on the way in which the British authorities have gone against their own rules, which and the whole concept of asylum, which Britain played a key role in creating in the first place. And for Assange himself, I am afraid anybody must be very seriously concerned.
Keep in mind, we could see something happen it would be very interesting timing. Do not be surprised.
No, absolutely. I mean,
you heard it here first. You heard it here first.
Well, indeed.
Don't be surprised that Mueller's report is released and then they snatch Julian Assange, because for the Mueller report, Russian hacking, okay, and WikiLeaks connection, that's going to dovetail right together, okay? There's only so there's a little bit of upside in all of this here. Not for Mr. Assange, I'm afraid.
Yes.
But Trump has all of the documentation. His lawyers have seen all the FISA warrants and all that. Mueller, Assange together, then Trump can say, well, what about this? It was the UK that meddled in the American election. And we're going to have these things happen very, very quickly, because Trump is going to say, well, the 2 years of investigating me, no collusion. Okay, you got some low-lying fruit, but what about this?
Yes.
Okay, and he has the legal authority to release it. So it's going to get really, really stormy once Mueller announces he's coming out, because Trump is going to defend himself.
That is why I agree with you, Peter, and that is why I still have a glimmer of hope that we will get to the truth of all of that. But as I said, for Assange himself, the situation is grim, and there's been talk that all the people at the embassy, the Ecuadorian diplomats who were there, have been reshuffled so as basically to change the pattern at the embassy in preparation, one feels, for basically throwing him out.
All right, and we'll end it on two quick questions. One is from Claire. Assange should have sought refuge in a non-U.S. vassal state. You've addressed this before, Alexander. She says Russia, China, Iran. And Alexander and Peter from Christiane would also like to know, and we'll finish it on this note, given what's happening to Assange, given what's happened to in Saudi Arabia with Khashoggi, has journalism suffered? Can journalism be fixed? Well, and so let's close it out with these two related questions.
Well, I think the first question about he went to the wrong country, to Britain, or to Britain of all places, is absolutely correct. And I think we've discussed this many times. Now, I think one point I would make was that, of course, Russia, China, and Iran are countries that the United States sees as adversaries. The reason he didn't want to go to those countries was because, of course, he was afraid, and can understand why, that if he did that, it would shoot to pieces his credibility. People would say he's a Russian agent or a Chinese agent or an Iranian agent or an anti-American, and he didn't want to be typecast in that way. And he didn't want WikiLeaks to be damaged in that way. So he came to Britain instead. Now, there is one country which I think has also played a bad role in this, and it is the country of which he is the citizen, and that is Australia. Logically, he should have been able to go to Australia and been safe there. It seems that was never the case, and it is very difficult to see where in the world Assange could have gone and both protected his credibility and at the same time been safe. But there we go. There we are. That was the problem. That was the problem he faced. Now, as for journalism today in mainstream media is not what I remembered it to be. If I take a time machine and go back to the world of journalism that I saw in the early 1980s, on television, in printed media, as it was then, it was completely different. It seems to me that all principles of objectivity and balance have gone completely out of the window. And I'm afraid I agree with the questioner. I think the position of journalists in the West is now very threatened, and incredibly, they are colluding in this. They are themselves acting as their own policemen, which is extraordinary to me. Peter?
I think that, ditto. I think that Julian Assange by the world of journalists says everything, doesn't it? It really does.
Well, exactly.
What it's gotten down to is this advocacy. Okay, that's all. I mean, like Jim Acosta. I mean, it's just theatrics, it's virtue signaling. There's no substance there whatsoever. That's why people watch our podcasts and others, okay? Because you don't get it in the mainstream anymore at all. It is an amazing groupthink experience and intensely self-censoring people. They do it themselves. They don't have to be threatened. They just know. Don't say that. Don't go there. Don't report that.
Yeah,
and
the fact that that no journalists.
You're anti-Trump, you're safe.
Yeah. The fact that no journalists have spoken out, mainstream media journalists have spoken out for Assange is I think says it.
Well, it's shocking given that some of them gained prizes.
Yeah. Joe Laurie of the Consortium News. He's a great guy. He's sticking up for Julian Assange.
Exactly.
All right. And on that note, guys, thank you very much for everyone who tuned into this live chat. We really appreciate just great questions, and we appreciate everything you guys do for us. And we just love interacting with everybody on here. Alexander Mercouris, Peter Lavelle, any final words before we close it out for this Friday? Happy Thanksgiving to everyone who is in the U.S. Happy Black Friday. Go out, buy some stuff, go shopping. And remember, on Sunday, we have our big live chat. So we look forward to talking to all of you then. Alexander, Peter.
That'll be after the Brexit summit. So
well, indeed, the dismal thing. Anyway, thanks, guys, for some really searching and interesting questions. And bring them on. We absolutely love answering them. At least Peter and I just revel in this sort of thing. So these sort of questions are just the thing to make us happy.
Peter, any final words as we enter the weekend?
Take a break from the news, everyone. It's so oppressive, and most of it's bad.
Well, I'd love to take a break from Brexit, Peter, but I'm afraid I'm not going to be given that option. I mean, we're going to have it thrust down us all the time.
But you're British. You deserve it.
We deserve it. Anyway, all the sins of the past are now being paid for with a vengeance, it would seem.
What is it? People say hanging on in quiet desperation is the English way.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Everybody have a great weekend. Have a great Friday, and take care of yourselves. Alexander Mercouris, editor-in-chief of the Duran in London. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk, live from Moscow. Thank you very much, everybody. Take care.